Our two candidates. Each of our candidates we're going to start you guys with 2-minute opening remarks. The candidates will then answer in alphabetical order, starting with Mr. Montgomery. For each question, we're going to rotate to the other candidate. Each candidate will have exactly 2 minutes to respond to the first of our 4 questions. If time allows, we have some additional questions with about a minute each after those.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, members of the Chamber, and never underestimate the power of the Chamber, the influence you have, a positive influence in our community, particularly today in these uncertain times. You guys do a great job, and you all make a big difference in our community. I want you to come back with me 6 years ago when I decided to run for DA. If you remember that time, we had some difficulties. We were rightfully concerned and disappointed in our criminal justice system. We were worried about the incumbent DA, who subsequently was convicted and went to jail for abuse of power and fraud. Later on, the leader of the largest criminal justice agency was not convicted, but rather was arrested by state authorities for sex crimes and charged by federal authorities for fraud and abuse of power. So there was a reason for us to be concerned. And that is why I was elected, because you were concerned that we were headed in the wrong direction. And that was my mandate, to change that direction and to instill confidence into our criminal justice system, into your legal system. You know, as business people, when we walk into an environment like that, to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. So we had a broken criminal justice system in some significant ways. So I stepped on some powerful toes. I challenged the political establishment, and I had to engage the criminal element to get done what I needed to get done. And you have you should have on your table a little document about what I've done over the past years. I've established a screening department. How much time? 13 seconds. And a lot of other changes that you can see on that document that I'll talk about. But what I told you then is what I tell you now. I wouldn't back up, I wouldn't back down, and I wouldn't back off. I am proud of what we have done at the DA's office. We have a safer and a better community because of it. Thank you.
Everybody hear me? Yep. Well, thank y'all very much for letting me come out. I appreciate it. The Chamber does a great thing for the business community. My name is Vincent Wynn, and I'm running for DA because there is a problem in the DA's office. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Mandeville, went to Mandeville High. No, I'm not a St. Paul's guy. I did actually go to Mandeville High. I graduated from Mandeville High, went to LSU, graduated from Loyola. I have 23 years of experience in the courtroom every day. That is what I do. I'm a trial lawyer. Not a plaintiff's trial lawyer. I am a criminal defense lawyer now. I was a prosecutor for 8 years. I've tried hundreds, if not thousands, of cases in state court, unlike my opponent, who has not tried one case in state court as a prosecutor. Not one. I have the experience necessary in order to take this DA's office and make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. We need access to this DA's office. One of the bigger complaints I hear in the community is lack of access for the DA himself. We have 4 offices in the DA's office: Bogalusa, Franklinton, and Slidell. I am committed to making sure that I am at one of those offices at some point in any point of the month. You, as the DA, have to be meeting with the public. What else do you do if you have staff running your office? You have got to meet with the public. Law enforcement. We have got to make sure in today's climate that law enforcement has support, period. There has got to be support for law enforcement, and there is no support for law enforcement currently in this DA's office. They are frustrated. And lastly, you have got to be a strong DA, someone who's going to be willing to stand up and try these tough cases and actually do what you're supposed to do. Our jury numbers are down to 45 a year. They used to be 120 a year. What are we doing with these cases? We're pleading these cases out. That has got to stop. I'm running for DA. I would love to answer your questions or the questions of the moderator. Thank you very much for your time.
What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders and for repeats of non-violent felony offenses?
Well, when you refer to low-level drug offenders, what I'm going to assume you're talking about is individuals who are addicted to substances, whether it's alcohol or whether it's illegal drugs. That's what I consider a low-level drug offender. Anybody who is distributing drugs, which addictive substance, putting people in a terrible situation, I don't consider low-level, even if they're distributing small amounts for small amounts of money at a time. So for those people who are drug addicts, they need to change their behavior. They're harming themselves, and because the drugs impact the way they think, they're harming others. Most of our crime, auto burglaries, home burglaries, petty theft, etc., domestic violence, is caused by people who are on drugs or who are abusing drugs. Now, if they're willing to change, their behavior, then let's don't send them to jail. Let's give them the help they need. And in fact, we have in this district a number of what we call specialty courts. In fact, under my administration, we started a veterans court, and that puts people under the responsibility of the courts. But at the same time, there's a stick, there's a carrot. You be good, you get off drugs, and you won't have a legal problem. You be bad, we're going to put you in jail. Likewise, I have a diversion program in my office where we don't even charge people, and if they're willing to make that change, then they move on with their life without a criminal record. But not everybody wants to change their behavior, and for those people who are a threat to our community, and sometimes simply a threat to themselves, we reserve a place in jail, and that's how we keep our community safe. Thank you.
There are several ways that the DA's office can help in issues relative to drug abuse. One of the biggest problems we face right now in this community is drug abuse. I don't know if you realize that, but when I'm standing in court listening to the pleas, probably 9 out of the 10 people standing up there are pleading guilty relative to a drug offense, period. I don't think people in the community realize how bad. It's an epidemic. And so there are some tools that you can extend to the people that have these problems. One, diversion. Diversion is DA probation. I'm sure folks know what that means. If they don't, it's an opportunity for someone who's a first offender to come in and receive basically DA probation so that they no longer have to be in the system, but be given an opportunity through several programs to make sure that they stay on track. If they don't, they go back to court. One of the other things you can do is specialty courts. We have DWI courts in St. Tammany. We have drug courts in St. Tammany. We are very fortunate in this parish to have money. And as a result of that, we are able to have some of the best programs probably in the nation, because if you don't, I don't know if you realize, but a lot of these programs were started here, and those pilot programs are being used across the country. And so if we can put these people in these drug court programs, give them the help they need. Look, you can't do this by yourself. You cannot get off these addictions by yourself. You need the tools. You need the treatment. You need the people that are in the community that are there for you to help. And lastly, again, if you give people that opportunity and they still don't get it, unfortunately, there is the end result. They're going to have to be prosecuted, and they're going to have to be put in jail. That's just the reality of it. And I'm not saying when you get to jail that you're thrown away. There's several programs in jail as well. Blue Harbor's one that you can actually put people in these programs so they get help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question, I'll begin. Mr. Vincent Wayne, you'll have the first answer to this.
Oh, I'm out the box? Okay.
We are the leader in the state with the highest number of specialty courts. Do you support the creation and ongoing movement of the specialty courts? And how do you envision the involvement of the DA's office with the specialty courts?
Well, I think I already touched on that a little bit. Again, we are very fortunate in our community to have some of the pilot programs. Peter Garcia started the drug court program. Judge Knight actually did the reentry program. I don't know if y'all know what reentry is, but it's a process where if you have a bad felony, you may have to go to jail for 2 or 3 years. They actually send you to Angola. You learn a life skill when you get there, and then when you come out, you're monitored by that particular drug court, that reentry court program. So I'm I'm a huge proponent. Look, I do criminal defense work. I've been doing it for 15 years. I see the other side. If we don't get these people help, all of us will suffer, because as a result of that, they start committing crimes. And the more times they commit crimes, it affects all of us. And so if we can continue to push to help with these specialty courts, let's get them the funding that they need. Let's get them the resources they need so that they can put these folks into these programs. They're wonderful programs. I've had the pleasure of probably putting in my career, since they were started, over 100 people in the drug court program. And it's amazing when you monitor these programs and your clients come back to you after 2 or 3 years and they look at you and say, look, I want to get it expunged. Y'all know what that means. They want it off their record. But they tell me, Vincent, had I not had that opportunity, I'd be dead. I'd be dead. And as a result, these programs help people. The DA's office is an integral part in making sure that these people get in these programs. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery, same question.
As I referred earlier in my earlier question, the problem with drugs is that you begin to use drugs and you think that you can control the drug, but then the drug controls you and you become a slave to that drug. So a lot of people, when they begin to use those drugs, would like to get off, but they don't have the control. And that's why these specialty courts, or even sometimes in our diversion program, because when I put people into diversion, that doesn't mean we will never prosecute them. That means that if they get off the drugs and they comply with these different requirements, that we won't prosecute them. And if they don't, then we prosecute them. Now, they still may be eligible for drug court after we prosecute them, but we will prosecute them. So they lose their volition. With proper help, they can get that volition back. And it is a tough fight, and those of you who have family members, or maybe you personally have experienced it, it is not easy. So the involvement, Tom, of the DA's office is that we are the gatekeeper for the specialty courts. The specialty courts can't exist without the support of the district attorney, and in fact, those individuals could not be referred into a specialty court without the district attorney's permission. So I have a prosecutor assigned to each one of those courts. Is a private defense attorney. I put hundreds, not 800, hundreds of people into diversion and also into the specialty courts. And I'm very proud of my work. Again, as I mentioned, the Veterans Court was started at a meeting in my office, and I support all of those courts, and they're doing a good job, and I applaud our judges for supporting them. Thank you so much.
Our third question, and I'll begin that with Mr. Montgomery. Parish government is mandated to fund the district attorney's office, the Justice Center, and the jail. How would you prefer the district attorney's office to be funded? And would you support a referendum to enable the district attorney to be its own taxing body rather than pass through parish government?
I would support such a referendum. I like the idea of being responsible for my own budget, and based on my performance, that the public support what I'm doing. I like that. It's the same thing. It's a basic business concept. You do a good job, you generate the revenues, the people support what you're doing, and you spend the money wisely, and I'm accountable directly to the people. I like that. I think from a business perspective, I would prefer that, and I would like to see that. On the other hand, right now we receive a certain amount of funding from parish government. I want to say it's about 30% of our, anywhere between 30 to 35%. What that does is it keeps me involved in parish government, gives me a relationship with parish government, forces me to interact with parish government, and there's some benefit to that. But as district attorney, I would rather have an independent revenue source and be responsible for that revenue source to the public, and have you guys vote on it and determine whether or not I'm doing the job that I should be doing, and justify it. However, I can live with the existence of the revenue that we have now from the parish. because it forces me to have a dealing, for instance, with President Cooper, with the council people, and to have a relationship with them and work with them together cooperatively in our community. Thank you.
I'm not a proponent of the DA's office having its own independent funding. Look, I think you have to get in there and fight for your money just like everybody else and justify your expenses. I can tell you from personal experience, the courthouse has very little money to run what they need to run. How do I know this? Again, I'm in court all the time, right? I see the judges and their staff cleaning their own offices because they have no money to hire service people to do this. You heard what I just said. That is a huge problem. And so if we take away and give the DA's office its own independent funding and its own hill, it doesn't have to deal with anybody or come to the parish president or go to the council, I think that detracts from our checks and balances. You've got to be in there fighting for your money, making sure that you're responsible and that your budget is where it needs to be. Just a little aside, I'm going to tell you real quick. I went back and looked. In 2014, for those that don't know, the budget increase that the DA's office requested, it was $2.18 million. In 2019, it has jumped to $4.8 million just from the parish. It's my understanding that the overall budget of the DA's office is over $9 million. That's a lot of money. And a lot of money that, do we actually need all that money in the DA's office? I'm not sure. It's very hard to get some of those statistics. But I'm here to tell you, I think you have to have checks and balances. There is a reason that we all, meaning the DA's office and all the other entities that are public, would have to go to make sure that they get the correct requested funding that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, again, I'll begin with Mr. Vincent Wayne for this one, and then there'll be the second part of this question that applies directly to Mr. Montgomery. Recently, there was a legal battle for the DA to maintain its right to serve as counsel for the parish government, and this went as high as the Supreme Court. This was, of course, won by the DA's office, as we know. Mr. Wayne, do you agree with the outcome, and would you have proceeded in the same way? And then to that question, Mr. Montgomery, on your response, how has this been working out in the past 2 years, and how's your relationship been with the council? Begin with Mr. Wayne.
Win, just so you know.
Sorry.
That's okay. Look, I understand what the charter says. It is a requirement, and it's always been the requirement that the DA's office represent not only, obviously, the folks that deal with the criminal side, but the civil side. And so now you have a situation where you have the parish president, the parish council, and the various planning members that are out there that seek legal advice, as well as all the other boards and hospital districts and all the other districts that are out there. I agree that that is the rule of law. However, I see tremendous conflict in the fact that we have one law firm, basically that's what the DA's office is one law firm, now representing 2 or 3 entities. So if you have a parish president that has a disagreement over certain things, and a council that also disagrees, what do you have to do then now in order to resolve that conflict? You have to hire outside counsel. Guess how much it costs to hire outside counsel? It is very, very expensive. And so I think the way that it was done in the past, to me, seems more logical. You still have assistant DAs that are going to be under the auspice of the DA's office. However, you would give the parish president his right to hire someone, obviously with approval of the DA, and you would give the right of that council to then hire a person. So it's their selection. Anybody ever heard of something called a Chinese wall? We use it in law all the time. Big firms love to use it. If you're on the 3rd floor, then you're the guy on the 2nd floor. There's no conflict, even though you're in the same law firm. So if you set up a process by which there is no, they're laughing at me over here in the law firms. If you set up a process by which there is no bleed over, no crossover conflict, you resolve the issue of that conflict and you save the parish a tremendous amount of money. Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery.
Well, we have a great relationship with the council. Michael and Reno tells me that we're providing them better legal service now than they had prior to the lawsuit in the prior arrangement. And I believe that that's the case. And by the way, we're performing those legal services at a savings to you, the taxpayer, of over $500,000 less a year. So I think it's working out very well. He mentions the DA budget. Let me just tell you, the DA budget, Vincent, is not $9 million. It's $12 million. You can find all of this on the DA website. And I'm going to give you, Tom, this information if you all want to put it up with yours. It has all the pie charts and all the breakout of where the money comes from and where the money goes. With regards to the conflicts that he referred to, you know how many conflicts we have had in the 2 years that we have represented the parish and the parish council and all the different boards and commissions? Zero. The conflict issue is a red herring. I'm not saying there's never going to be a conflict, but in the 2 years since we've been there, we haven't had a conflict. As a matter of fact, some of you are familiar with the Medline controversy, where there's a building is being built and just south of Covington, just north of the interstate. And so on the one hand, I'm in court with my lawyers, Alex Drucrow, representing the parish government, and Mike Cooper, defending the parish's position regarding going forward with that development. On the other hand, the parish has denied the permit. And so I have another lawyer who is representing parish government in their process of denying the permit. And I have a third lawyer, all in the same office and all with these Chinese walls, representing the Board of Adjustments, who's handling the hearing. So all of these things are being handled, and they're being handled efficiently, fairly, and at a savings to you, the taxpayer, and to the satisfaction of my clients, parish government, parish council, and the boards and commissions.
This next question, just because of the way it's worded, I'm going to ask that we actually have Mr. Wynn respond first, and then Mr. Montgomery, second part. Mr. Wynn, what programs or policies would you like to implement as a district attorney to reduce crime and increase public safety? And then to that part, Mr. Montgomery, are there new programs or policies you two would like to implement? But again, I'll begin with Mr. Wynn.
Sure. Some of the things we've touched on, diversion programs are wonderful to give first-time offenders the opportunity to not actually have a charge or a record. I think it's important that people who have made a mistake get an opportunity to maybe not have that on their record. Secondly, you have the specialty courts that I think we really need to step up and do as much as we can to put those people into those specialty courts. Something that I came up with in looking at some of the issues that we faced in the past, meaning that we had some issues with the prior administration and some issues there. I think most law enforcement agencies have IA divisions. That's an investigative division that's inside that office that is autonomous from a particular the agency. And so I would like to see us maybe implement something specifically inside the DA's office, that if people have complaints against assistant DAs or even the DA himself, that they have a voice that they can actually use to then further that problem. And then you can bring that to someone who needs to investigate it, typically state police, typically the Department of Justice. So I think that's something that needs to be implemented because it is important that people in the community that have grievances with the DA's office, look, they're the top prosecutors in the land. In this parish and Washington Parish, it's very hard to get your voice out against a prosecutor. Very hard. So I think that's another program I'd like to see happen in St. Tammany and Washington parishes. I think if we continue to improve our trials in St. Tammany and to be tough when it comes to actually trying these cases. I am in court every day. This is what I do. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I see it. We plead far too many cases in this parish right now. We've got to step up and make sure that we are training our assistant DAs, implementing some programs so that they have the trial experience necessary to try these cases. Thank you.
Well, let me go first to this trial and lack of trial argument that my opponent has been making. Ladies and gentlemen, under the previous administration, they would have over 100 trials a year. The reason they would have over 100 trials a year is that Walter Reed would go to his felony assistants. And by the way, he was never a felony assistant. He's never prosecuted a felony case before a jury. As far as I know, and correct me, you've never defended a felony case before a jury.
I actually have, and I've sat second chair on about 5. Warren.
Okay.
So,
Drug, He doesn't have the felony experience, ladies and gentlemen. I have prosecuted at the federal level numerous, and I mean over a dozen.
3 cases,
week-long,
Warren.
no,
3 cases.
That's a lie, and you should know it. You don't have your facts straight, buddy.
It's 3 cases.
I've tried the Billy Joe Nichols case. I've tried.
Is that the one where there was
Fajardo
judicial
case.
or prosecutorial
I've tried
misconduct?
a whole bunch of cases. Ladies and gentlemen, you can check the record, and I'll tell you, I'll put it on my website tomorrow so you'll know all the cases. So I've tried those cases. What they used to do is have fake trials that cost you, the taxpayer, money. You can go look it up at NOLA.com. The article was written by the Times-Picayune at that time. There were fake trial stats. We have over 40 trials a year under my administration. They're all real trials. My trial number per capita is equal to or better than the other jurisdictions. We're number 3 in the state, ahead of East Baton Rouge, but behind Orleans and Jefferson, which of course have a much larger population. Let's get to some of these ideas of things we can do. And one is something that Colin Sims, the head of my criminal division, has been pursuing, and that is the early identification of individuals who were in jail, incarcerated, shortly after the arrest, and they have a drug problem or a mental health problem or some sort of identifiable problem. If we can get them out, if we can identify them early, get them out of the jail, get them over to safe haven, get them into a drug rehab early on instead of having them sit in the jail and be paid at a very high expense and at a risk to them, that would be a big asset. We're working on it, but we need the cooperation of the judges. We need the cooperation of other entities. We've made a lot of progress. We need more progress in that. The other thing that we've done is drug task force. We have a domestic violence task force and a drug task force. I think we can increase to do that. Those things didn't exist before I came into office. That will keep us safer.
Thank you. We have one last question that comes. Thank you. One last question that comes from the chamber. And again, we ask you guys just state the questions and you'll have a chance to rebuttal or counter on each other in the next question after that. What role does the DA have in the criminal justice reform?
Well, criminal justice, you're talking about the state level. And those of you who may not be familiar with it, over the past couple of years have been an effort made to reduce the prison population in the state of Louisiana. And the governor came to the District Attorneys Association. As in an association, we sat down and we negotiated with the governor. I was involved in some of those discussions, and we agreed to some changes in the law, which would permit people to get out of jail a little bit earlier. We still don't know. That happened about 2 years ago. We still don't have the results of what the long-term impact of that is going to be. We do know that the jail population has gone down, and that may be a good thing or it may be a bad thing. If this thing boomerangs on us and we have criminals walking the street and committing crimes, then it was a bad thing. But we're going to let it play out. We're going to see how it goes. But we cooperated with the governor. We tried to make reasonable adjustments in time served and time sentencing. And so far, I think it's been successful.
I think the DA has a role, obviously, to follow the rules as they've been implemented by the state and the legislature. You know, one of the things I think a DA's office has to do is question whether or not it's necessary to always file multiple bill offenders. What does that mean? If you have a person who normally has an opportunity to, say, get a plea deal that's of 0 to 5 and they're a third or fourth offender, and you file that bill, that just went to 35 years. So there is a way that the DA's office can reduce the overall prison population, reduce the number of multiple bills you're filing, and get these people into specialty courts. The other thing you can do is don't file increased bonds. That is historically done almost every day in this court, in our courts here in St. Tammany. If you increase the bonds on folks that are indigent, they can't make bonds, and so they stay in jail. Guess what? The longer they stay in jail waiting on trials, the more it costs us as people in this community. So you've got to hold back on filing these bonds, increasing these bonds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the next question is you're going to give each other. Ask each candidate to ask the other one a question. Their opponent will have 2 minutes to answer the question. We'll begin the question from Mr. Vincent went first to Mr. Warren Montgomery.
Warren, in multiple forums, you have repeatedly challenged my candidacy and credibility, referencing my 8 years as an assistant district attorney under the prior administration. Is it accurate? And that you value and utilize that same experience of the prior administration by continuing to employ my former colleagues, Tony Sanders, Ronnie Gratianette, Shea Penton, David Wildbacker, Bruce Deering, Eson Boland, Tammy Keaton, Harold Bartholomew, Ken Dory, Rex English, and David Duke. Do you value and utilize that experience?
Absolutely, I kept them. I kept them, and they're prosecuting felony cases, which is something you didn't do. Let me just, by the way, I just wrote down here, you asked me about felony cases, I just wrote down a few names. Rosalia Fajardo, the first case in the state of Louisiana for money laundering. Billy Joe Nichols, a big cocaine importing group that flew into Thibodeau. Johnny Zulo, that was a case of identities fraud, theft, et cetera, et cetera. Faiz Sakafi and Manolo Binker, those were Cuban and a Honduran who were importing drugs into the case. My star witness was the son of, who was the guy who was murdered up in Baton Rouge? Anybody remember his name? Colin, do you remember his name? They made a movie, American. Barry Seal. Barry Seal was his son. That's actually how we got, Barry Seal was murdered in Baton Rouge, assassinated by the Colombians. And his son we caught him, and that's how we flipped him, and that's how we got Barry Seal, among other reasons, to come in and cooperate. And you can go watch that movie tonight. I think it's called American Hero or something. And there's a whole bunch of other cases, David Samuels, Arabi Kloglu, and I can't remember all the other names. But it's been over a dozen cases, most of which were a week long. So with regards to those people that I kept, those people have done a good job. I came in, I had to look around, and I did what was fair and right. And that is, I evaluated those individuals, and if I thought they could be a benefit to you, the public, I kept them. But on top of that, and by the way, I think those are all ethical, honest, hardworking, qualified people. On top of that, I brought in a lot of honest, ethical, hardworking people, and my office is an office of high ethics, high morale, and high performance. That's what you deserve, and that's what you're getting.
Mr. Montgomery, your question to Mr. Wynn?
Vincent, you said you've had second chair, and I don't even know if these even people understand what second chair means on a felony case. But the fact is, you've never tried a felony case before a jury. I don't know if you've ever tried a case as a defense attorney before a jury. You don't have the experience, and now you want to be DA, and you want to lead these felony trial prosecutors into battle as district attorney. You don't have that experience that all of these people have. How do you think you're going to direct those people and supervise those people when you yourself don't have the experience and the bread and butter issues of being a felony prosecutor, and you were never a felony prosecutor in the 8 years you were at the DA's office?
I don't deny that I was not a felony prosecutor. My job was to try misdemeanor cases. Don't belittle the fact that a lot of these cases people ended up in jail as well. Battery on police officers, aggravated assault cases. So it's also an issue of whether or not you understand the dynamics of what's going on. Let's be real. Warren Montgomery has never tried a single case in state court. Not one. As a prosecutor. Not one. Guys, there is a different set of rules in state court. There is a different set of rules in federal court. Just because you've tried a few cases in federal court doesn't mean you have any experience trying cases as a prosecutor in state court. I have tried probably 1,200 or more cases in this parish. Look it up. It's what I did for 8 years. I loved it. It's what you do if you're a prosecutor. No, I don't have a felony. That wasn't my job at the DA's office. Did I sit second chair? Yeah, I sat second chair. I was very good at trying DWI cases, and so sometimes the staff would ask me to come help them try those cases because we tried 2 and 3 a day. It would take us hours, starting in the morning at 8 and sometimes not leaving till 8 or 9 o'clock. So to say that I have no experience trying cases, state cases, to be able to leave that DA's office, that's a red herring. That's a fallacy. Guys, I also try cases as a defense lawyer. I have tried cases outside of the DA's office, not as a prosecutor, and as a jury trial. Do your facts. Look at your facts, Warren. So to say that I don't have that experience, that's not true. I promise you that's not true. Warren Montgomery doesn't try cases. He doesn't go to the court. You can't find Warren Montgomery. He's got a great guy sitting over at the table over here that pretty much runs his office. If you need something in that DA's office, I have seen Warren Montgomery 3 times in 5 years. 3 times. He's not available. He's not accessible. Thank you.
This is the last opportunity. We're now going to have closing remarks from each of our candidates. I will begin with Mr. Vincent Wynn. We ask you to keep it 3 minutes for closing remarks.
Sure. I would not be running for DA if I didn't think there was a problem in the DA's office. This is not about me. I have a successful practice. I have 5 lawyers that work for me. I've got a staff of 12. We do very well. What I see day in and day out of the DA's office and the issues in the courthouse scare me. There are problems systemically in the DA's office currently. They are not doing their job. It's just plain and simple. They are not doing their job. We have got to have better prosecution rates. Let me put my glasses on. I'll tell you real quick. So I went back and looked for the past year and a half. As we know, there's been a 60% reduction in the overall jury trials in St. Tammany Parish. But more importantly, when you go back a year and a half, there have been 122 misdemeanor domestic violence cases that have been reduced from a domestic abuse battery down to a regular battery. That re-victimizes victims when you actually reduce those charges. DWI cases, the bail whack of St. Tammany, we get a lot of them. In the past year and a half, this office has reduced 61 of these to something other than a DWI. Now, I went back and looked at my stats, because I keep them, to see how many cases I had actually reduced to something other than a DWI. In 8 years, it was 42. So you're talking a year and a half, they've already reduced 61. 57 cases in the past year and a half have been reduced from a second offense to a first offense. That's huge numbers. That's ineffective prosecution. 131 felony domestic abuse cases were reduced to misdemeanors in the past year and a half. 131. Those are women that have been severely beaten or strangled, that have actually had their cases reduced. East St. Tammany Court, the Slidell City Court, DA's office actually represents them and does their business over there. Of the 156 cases that were done from January of 2017 to 2019, 48% of those cases were reduced by or refused by the DA's office. 48%, half. 24 went to lesser crimes. 4 of those cases in 3 years went to trial. 4. Guess how many convictions there were? 0. I got a man sitting in right here that's the judge that'll tell you the same. That is ineffective prosecution. We have a problem right now in the DA's office. We have got to fix that problem, and that is why I'm running. My name is Vincent Wynn. I am the law and order candidate. Please vote for me, number 77. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard what the problem is. The problem is Vincent Wynn plays fast and loose with the facts. The past 18 months, we have this and that. For ladies and gentlemen, for the last 6 months, the courts have been shut down. Okay? I mean, let's just face it. He is not leveling with you on this data because you as business people analyze numbers and you know you've got to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. With regards to Slidell City Court, at that particular time, the chief of police was arresting on domestic violence cases both parties, both the alleged victim and both the alleged perpetrator. What do you think they want to do when they go to court? Both get convicted? Of course not. So we had to correct that, and we did, but for a period of time there, we couldn't prosecute those cases. Okay, this is just an example. Being available to you and accessible to you. Those of you who are in this organization know that I have spoken to you on multiple occasions. I've been to your governmental affairs committee. I've been to your functions. I've been available to you in many other ways. And by the way, not only this organization, but all the organizations before which we've spoken. And you know I've been available to you. That is a bunch of bunkum, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, strong leadership in the DA's office. If you've got that little sheet of paper, can I hand one of them? Leadership, ladies and gentlemen, is results. These numbers, they've been certified by the Metropolitan Crime Commission. An 8% increase in felony convictions, 16% decrease in, well, this number is not, but we got it, 16% decrease in average processing time from arrest to resolution, a 39% increase in domestic violence guilty pleas. I'm sorry, they came in and decided to plead guilty. I think that's a good thing. A 22% decrease in domestic violence cases dismissed or refused, and millions of dollars saved for you, the taxpayer. Ladies and gentlemen, that's results. That is leadership. The rest of this is smoke and mirrors. I stand on my record. I'm proud of the people that I've kept at the DA's office. I'm proud of the people who have joined me at the DA's office. Let me finish the job. I told you before when I ran 6 years ago, I was going to do 2 terms and that's it. I want one more term to finish this job and stop the corruption, the deceit, and the arrogance of the prior administration from coming in and destroying all the good work that myself and my staff has accomplished. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and God bless you.